Have you ever looked at the person you loved and wondered when they became a stranger? Not slowly, not gradually, but suddenly. One day they were warm, attentive, almost obsessed with you, and then it was like a switch flipped. They stopped looking at you the same way, stopped listening, stopped caring, and you were left asking a question that can haunt someone for years. What did I do wrong? But here's the truth most people never tell you. You didn't change. They did. And understanding why that shift happens might finally help you release the guilt you've been carrying. At first, it doesn't even feel real. You tell yourself you're imagining things. Maybe they're just stressed. Maybe they're tired. Maybe work is overwhelming. So you start trying harder. You become more patient, more understanding, more forgiving. You walk on eggshells. You analyze every conversation, every message, every look. And slowly, something inside you begins to break. Because the person who once made you feel special now treats you like you're invisible. Or worse, like you're the problem. And here's the part that hurts the most. You still remember who they used to be. The sweet version, the loving version. The person who once made you believe you were deeply valued. So your mind keeps asking, where did that person go? But here's the part most people don't understand. That version of them was never permanent. In relationships with narcissistic personalities, the beginning often feels almost magical. It's intense, fast, emotionally overwhelming. You feel chosen, special, seen. But the stage has a name, love bombing. And it's not love, it's emotional strategy. Because narcissistic personalities are often searching for something very specific. Not partnership, not mutual growth, but validation, attention, emotional supply. And in the beginning, they give affection freely because it helps them secure that supply. But something begins to change over time. And this is where the confusion starts. Because the moment a narcissist feels they have your emotional attachment, the dynamic shifts, and most people don't recognize the exact moment it happens. In fact, many victims miss the first signs completely. But there's one subtle shift that almost always appears before everything else starts to unravel, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. Think back for a second. When did you first feel something was different? Was it the way they started criticizing small things? The way conversations suddenly felt tense? Or maybe the way they stopped apologizing when they hurt you? Small things, but they slowly change everything. And this is why the experience becomes so psychologically confusing. Because your brain keeps comparing two different versions of the same person. The one from the beginning and the one standing in front of you now. Here's the part most people don't understand. The beginning of the relationship wasn't necessarily fake, but it also wasn't sustainable. Because narcissistic personalities often mirror what they think you want. They become the partner you hoped for, the person who seems to understand you perfectly. But mirroring isn't the same as genuine emotional connection. And eventually, the mask starts slipping. Not always dramatically, sometimes quietly, sometimes slowly, until one day, you realize you're the only one still trying. Maybe you tried to talk about it. You said something like, I feel like you're distant lately. And instead of listening, they turned it around. Why are you always so sensitive? Or, nothing is wrong, you're imagining things. And suddenly you find yourself apologizing for bringing up something that hurt you. This moment happens in countless toxic relationships, and it creates a very specific emotional trap. Because now the focus shifts away from their behavior and onto your reaction. And this is why the emotional damage becomes so deep. Because over time, you stop trusting your own perception. You begin questioning your feelings, your memories, your intuition. You start wondering, maybe I really am the problem. And something else begins happening at that exact moment. Something most people don't notice until much later. You start editing yourself, your words, your reactions, your needs. Before speaking, you think, will this upset them? Before expressing a feeling, you wonder, am I overreacting again? And slowly, almost invisibly, your emotional world starts getting smaller. The things that once felt natural now feel dangerous to say. So you stay quiet, you swallow the discomfort. You convince yourself it's easier that way. But here's the part most people don't realize until after the relationship ends. Every time you silence your feelings to keep the peace, a small part of your identity disappears. Not dramatically, not overnight, but piece by piece. And this is exactly how many narcissistic dynamics reshape a person's sense of self. Not through obvious cruelty all the time, but through subtle emotional pressure, through confusion, through moments that make you question whether your feelings are even valid. And here's something many survivors later recognize. The moment you started feeling like you had to be careful around them, that was already a warning sign. Because love should feel safe, not monitored, not negotiated every time you want to express a feeling. But when you're inside the relationship, your mind doesn't see it that clearly. Instead, it tells you a different story. Relationships take work. Nobody is perfect. Maybe I'm expecting too much. And those thoughts keep you trying longer than you should. Trying to repair something that was never balanced to begin with. And this is why leaving or even emotionally detaching can feel so incredibly difficult. Because by that point, you're not only attached to the person, you're attached to the hope that things might return to how they were in the beginning. But the truth is, that beginning was a stage. And the moment you stop chasing that version of them, you begin reclaiming pieces of yourself that were slowly disappearing. But here's the truth. Healthy relationships don't make you feel like you're constantly defending your reality. Take a moment and think about that. In a healthy relationship, you don't feel like you're losing yourself. You don't feel like you're shrinking to keep the peace. And you definitely don't feel like love is something you have to earn over and over again. Narcissistic dynamics often follow a pattern. First comes idealization, then devaluation, and sometimes discard. But the devaluation stage is where most people get stuck. Because it's not always obvious, it's subtle. It happens through small comments, cold silences, passive criticism, withholding affection, and slowly, the relationship becomes emotionally exhausting. But here's something many survivors realize only later. The moment you start trying harder to get back the person from the beginning, that's often the moment the trauma bond becomes strongest. Because now you're not just in love, you're emotionally chasing a memory. You might have found yourself thinking, if I just explain things better, if I just try harder, if I just fix whatever I'm doing wrong, maybe they'll go back to how they used to be. But that version of the relationship depended on something temporary. the early stage of emotional capture. And here's the most important thing to understand. The shift you experienced was not a reflection of your worth. It was the collapse of a dynamic that was never built on emotional equality. You didn't lose your value. You simply stopped playing a role that benefited them. And recognizing that can be one of the most powerful steps in recovery. Because the moment you stop blaming yourself, something inside you starts to heal. Many people who leave narcissistic relationships go through a painful phase. They grieve the person they thought they knew. They replay conversations, moments, memories, trying to understand what happened. But over time, a different realization begins to form. You weren't losing love, you were losing an illusion. And when that illusion fades, you finally begin to see yourself clearly again. If any part of this story felt familiar, please remember something important. Your empathy wasn't weakness, your loyalty wasn't a mistake. Your capacity to love deeply is not something to be ashamed of. It simply means you cared. And the fact that you're here trying to understand what happened means you're already moving forward. Even if it doesn't feel like it yet. If this helped you understand what you went through, consider subscribing. This channel exists to help people heal, rebuild their self-worth, and move forward after toxic relationships. And if you've ever wondered why narcissists seem to move on so quickly after a breakup, the next video on this channel explains exactly why they replaced people so fast. You're not alone in this, and healing is possible, one step at a time.